Why would a daughter smile, spray heavy perfume in front of her asthmatic father, and tell him to leave early, only to beg him to return hours later? How did a calm metallurgical engineer, a man everyone thought they could ignore, turn one small act of disrespect into a lawful reckoning? This is how I learned that the quietest people often keep the strongest receipts. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, hit the hype button, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? The parking lot smelled like burnt rubber and old coffee. I parked my truck under the third lamppost, exactly where Lydia told me to meet her. My inhaler sat in the cup holder, cap already loosened. I'd learned that habit years ago. Keep it ready, because waiting for the seal to crack when your lungs start closing is like trying to open a parachute after you've already hit the ground. The apartment building rose above me, all red brick and narrow windows. Lydia lived on the 4th floor with Marcus. I hadn't been invited up in months. Tonight was different, she said. She wanted to talk, face to face, just us. I stepped out into the evening air, cool and clean, and locked the truck. My chest felt fine, good even. I'd taken my preventative inhaler at 4 o'clock, right after my shift ended at the plant. Routine mattered with asthma. Miss a dose, and you spend the next 2 hours wheezing like a broken accordion. The building's front door opened. Lydia stepped out. She wore a white blouse and dark jeans, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look older than 27. Professional, polished. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't the smile I remembered from when she was younger. This one had edges. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, kiddo." I walked toward her, hands in my jacket pockets. "You said it was important?" "It is." She glanced back at the door, then at me. "But first, I need to tell you something." I stopped a few feet away. Something in her posture made me cautious. She stood too straight, like she was performing. "Okay," I said. "What's going on?" She reached into her purse. For a second, I thought she was pulling out her phone. Then I saw the small black bottle. Perfume. My stomach dropped. "I know you don't like strong scents," she said, still smiling. "But I'm testing this new brand for a friend's company. I told her I'd wear it tonight." "Lydia, you know I can't." She raised the bottle and sprayed it twice. Not on herself. Toward me. The mist hung in the air between us, thick and cloying, like flowers rotting in sugar water. I stepped back, but it was already too late. The scent hit my throat first, then my lungs. I felt the tightness start immediately, that familiar pressure wrapping around my ribs like hands squeezing. "It's not that strong," she said, laughing a little. "You're always so dramatic about this stuff." I couldn't answer. My breath shortened. I fumbled for my inhaler, fingers clumsy against the plastic. The door opened again. Marcus stepped out, grinning. He was a tall guy, thick shoulders. Always looked like he was about to tell a joke at someone else's expense. "Lydia, come on. Your dad's turning red." "He's fine." She waved a hand. "He does this every time. It's psychological." I got the inhaler to my mouth and took 2 puffs. The medicine tasted bitter, metallic. I held my breath, counting to 10, feeling the tightness ease just enough to let air through. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. "You good, Damon? You look like you just ran a marathon." I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. Lydia crossed her arms. "Look, if you're going to react like this, maybe it's better if you just head home. We can talk another time." I stared at her. My daughter. The girl I used to carry on my shoulders when she was 5. The one who used to draw pictures of us holding hands. You told me to come here," I said, voice rough. "I know, but if you're going to make a scene over a little perfume, I don't think tonight's going to work." Marcus smirked. "Too sensitive as usual, huh?" I stood there, inhaler still in my hand, trying to understand what had just happened. This wasn't an accident. She looked right at me and sprayed it anyway, and now she was telling me to leave. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll go." Lydia's expression softened, just a fraction. "Don't be like that. I'm just saying, maybe you're not feeling well enough." "I'm fine." I turned back toward my truck. "Dad?" I didn't answer. I walked across the parking lot, got in, and started the engine. Through the windshield, I saw them both still standing there, Lydia talking to Marcus, both of them laughing about something. I drove home in silence, windows cracked, cold air rushing through the cab. My chest still felt tight. But it wasn't just the asthma anymore. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had set completely. My townhouse sat dark and quiet, exactly how I'd left it 6 hours ago. I unlocked the front door, dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, and stood there in the dim light from the street lamp outside. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, expecting a work email or a spam call. but it was a text from Lydia. "Dad, can you come back? It's urgent." I stared at the screen. 3 hours ago, she told me to leave. Now she needed me back. I set the phone down and walked to the bathroom. My inhaler sat on the counter next to my toothbrush. I looked at myself in the mirror. 53 years old. Gray creeping into my hair. Lines around my eyes that hadn't been there 10 years ago. I looked tired. I looked like someone who'd spent too long pretending things were fine when they weren't. My phone buzzed again. "Please, I really need your help." I closed my eyes, leaned against the sink, and tried to remember the last time Lydia had said please and actually meant it. I couldn't. The kitchen smelled like coffee and old wood. I sat at the table, phone in hand, staring at Lydia's messages. She'd sent 4 more since the first 2, each one more urgent than the last. "Dad, are you ignoring me? I'm sorry about earlier. Marcus shouldn't have said that. I really need to talk to you. Can you call me? It's about something important." I set the phone down and rubbed my eyes. My chest still felt tight from the perfume incident, but the inhaler had done its job. I could breathe. I was fine. Physically, anyway. The problem was, I couldn't stop replaying the moment in my head. The way she'd smiled before raising that bottle. The way she'd laughed when I struggled to breathe. The way Marcus had leaned against the door like it was all some kind of joke. This wasn't new, I knew that. But I'd been pretending it was. My ex-wife, Irene, used to warn me about this. She'd say, "Damon, you let people walk over you because you think staying quiet makes you a good person. It doesn't, it just makes you a doormat." She wasn't wrong. But what was I supposed to do? Lydia was my daughter. I'd raised her. I'd paid for her college. I'd helped her move into 3 different apartments. I'd co-signed her first car loan. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped seeing me as a father and started seeing me as something else. A resource. A backup plan. Someone who'd always be there when she needed something but could be dismissed when she didn't. I stood and walked to the counter, poured myself a cup of cold coffee from the pot I'd made that morning. It tasted bitter, burnt. I drank it anyway. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up. This time it was a longer message. "Dad, I know you're upset. I overreacted. I shouldn't have sprayed the perfume like that. I was testing it for a friend and I got carried away. Can we please talk? I need your advice on something, and you're the only person I trust with this." I read it 3 times. The apology felt hollow, not because of the words, but because of the pattern behind them. This was how it always went. Lydia would push, I'd pull back, and then she'd pull me right back in with just enough kindness to make me think maybe this time would be different, but it never was. I thought about the birthdays she'd forgotten. Not once or twice. 4 years running. She'd call a week later, apologize, say she'd been busy with work or Marcus or planning some event. I'd tell her it was fine, because that's what I did. I made it fine. I thought about the time I'd asked her to visit me in the hospital after a bad asthma attack 2 years ago. She'd said she would. She didn't. Later, she explained she'd gotten caught up with a friend's crisis and forgot. I told her I understood. Because that's what I did. I understood. I thought about the money. The loans I'd given her that she never paid back. The rent I'd covered when she was between jobs. The car repair I'd paid for when she claimed her account was frozen. Every time she'd promised to pay me back. Every time I'd pretend I believed her. And every time I'd told myself it didn't matter. She was my daughter. Family helped family. But family was supposed to go both ways. I finished the coffee and set the mug in the sink. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. The neighborhood cafe was a 10-minute walk from my house. I went there sometimes after work, just to sit and clear my head. The place was small, 6 tables and a counter, owned by a quiet guy named Peter who made decent coffee and didn't ask questions. I pushed through the door and the bell chimed above me. Peter looked up from behind the counter and nodded. I nodded back and took a seat at the corner table by the window. The cafe was mostly empty. An older woman sat near the door, reading a paperback. A younger couple shared a slice of cake at the table across from me. And in the back, near the restroom hallway, I saw someone I recognized. Lydia. She was sitting with a friend, a woman I didn't know, both of them laughing about something. I froze. She hadn't seen me yet. I could leave, just walk back out before she noticed. But then she said my name. "My dad's useful when I need him," Lydia said, loud enough that I could hear her clearly. "But he's not someone I really respect, you know? He's just there, like a safety net. I call, he shows up. It's convenient." Her friend laughed. "That sounds kind of harsh." "I mean, it's true. He's sweet, but he's weak. Always has been. My mom used to say the same thing. He lets people push him around because he's too afraid of conflict." I sat there, frozen, my hands flat on the table. Lydia kept talking. I sprayed perfume near him earlier and he freaked out. Full-on asthma attack. It's so dramatic. He does it for attention. Does he actually have asthma? Yeah, but he exaggerates it. He always makes everything about him. I stood slowly, carefully, and walked out of the cafe before they could see me. The bell chimed as I left. I walked 3 blocks before I stopped moving. My chest felt tight again, but this time it wasn't the asthma. It was something else. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my phone. Lydia had sent 2 more messages while I was out. Dad, please call me. I really need to talk to you. It's important. I set the phone down and opened my laptop. I typed in my insurance provider's website and logged into my account. I navigated to the section marked Dependent Coverage. Lydia's name was listed there, active, current. I stared at it for a long time. Then I heard a sound. A piece of paper sliding under my front door. I walked over and picked it up. It was a receipt from the cafe. I hadn't paid for anything. I flipped it over. On the back, in Lydia's handwriting, was a note. Dad, thanks for always being there when I need you. You're the best backup plan a girl could ask for. She must have written it earlier and left it for the employee to give me. A joke. A careless, thoughtless joke. I stood there holding the receipt, reading those words over and over, and for the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. The metallurgical plant sat on the edge of town, a sprawling complex of steel buildings and concrete lots. I'd worked there for 26 years, most of that time in the testing lab where we ran stress analysis on metal samples. It was quiet work, methodical, the kind of job where you could lose yourself in numbers and precision. I parked in my usual spot and walked through the main entrance. The morning air was cold, sharp enough to make my lungs tighten slightly, but I'd already taken my inhaler before leaving the house. I was prepared. I was always prepared. Inside, the plant hummed with machinery and voices. Workers moved through the hallways carrying clipboards and tool bags. I nodded to a few familiar faces and headed toward the lab. My phone rang as I reached the door. Lydia. I let it go to voicemail. She called again 5 minutes later. I ignored it. At lunch, I finally listened to the messages. Dad, I don't know why you're not answering. I really need to talk to you. It's about the studio. Can you call me back? The studio. She'd mentioned it before. Some kind of wellness center she and Marcus were planning to open. Yoga, meditation, overpriced smoothies. She'd been talking about it for months, but hadn't given me any details. I deleted the message and went back to work. That afternoon, Harold Keene stopped by the lab. He was the union rep, a guy in his early 60s with gray hair and a face that looked like it had seen too many negotiations. We'd known each other for years. Not friends exactly, but close enough that we could talk without wasting time on small talk. Damon, he said, leaning against the door frame. Got a minute? Sure. I set down the metal sample I'd been examining and wiped my hands on a rag. What's up? Just checking in. You seemed off yesterday. I shrugged. Long day. Harold studied me for a moment, then stepped inside and closed the door behind him. You know, I heard something interesting from Riley in HR. Riley Quinn, the compliance officer. Sharp woman, never missed a detail. Yeah? I said. She mentioned you've got a dependent on your health coverage? Your daughter, right? I nodded slowly. Lydia. She's 27. Still qualifies under the extended dependent policy. Right. Harold crossed his arms. You know that policy is voluntary, don't you? I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, you're not required to keep her on it. You can remove dependents any time, no penalty, no waiting period. It's entirely at your discretion. I stared at him. I didn't know that. Most people don't. The company doesn't advertise it, but it's in the union contract. Page 43, Section 12. I helped write that clause 10 years ago. I set the rag down. Why are you telling me this? Harold shrugged. No reason. Just thought you should know what options you have, especially if someone's been taking advantage of you. He left before I could ask what he meant by that. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the testing lab, running stress tests on steel samples. The machine applied pressure slowly, incrementally, recording the exact point where the metal began to deform. Some samples bent. Some cracked. Some held longer than expected, resisting until the very last second. I watched the needle climb on the gauge, the metal groaning under the weight, and thought about what Harold had said. Lydia didn't have her own health coverage. I knew that. She'd mentioned it once, casually, during a conversation about her job. She worked part-time at a boutique downtown, no benefits. Marcus had a job in sales, but his company didn't offer spousal coverage. They relied on me. Without my insurance, they'd have to pay out of pocket or buy their own plan. That wasn't cheap, and Lydia knew that. My phone rang again. Same number, same name. This time, I answered. Dad, finally. Her voice sounded relieved, maybe even grateful. I've been trying to reach you all day. I know, I was working. Right, of course. Listen, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come over tonight? I hesitated. What's this about? The studio. Marcus and I found the perfect space, but we need a co-signer for the lease. The landlord won't approve us without one. I know it's a lot to ask, but you're the only person we trust with this. I leaned back against the lab table, phone pressed to my ear. You need me to co-sign a lease. Just as a formality. We'll handle all the payments. You won't have to do anything. Lydia, please, Dad. This is really important to us. It's our dream. And honestly, after everything you missed when I was growing up, I think you owe me this. I went very still. What did you just say? I'm just saying you weren't always there for me. You were always working, always too busy, and now I'm asking for your help with something that actually matters, and you're hesitating. I closed my eyes. I was working to support you. I know, but you weren't there, and now I need you to be there. So can you do this or not? I opened my eyes and stared at the metal sample on the table in front of me. It was bent now, twisted under pressure, but it hadn't broken. Not yet. I'll think about it, I said. Dad? I said I'll think about it. I ended the call. Harold appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, holding a folder. He didn't say anything at first, just set the folder on the table in front of me. What's this? I asked. Coverage regulations, dependent access rules, he said. Everything you need to know about what you control and what you don't. Thought you might want to read it. I looked down at the folder, then back up at him. Thanks, I said quietly. He nodded and left. I opened the folder and started reading. By the time I finished, I understood something I should have realized years ago. Lydia didn't need me. She needed what I could give her, and I'd been giving it for free. The HR office sat in the administrative wing of the plant, a sterile room with white walls and fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out. Riley Quinn sat behind her desk, glasses perched on her nose, a stack of policy manuals open in front of her. Damon, she said, looking up, Harold mentioned you had some questions about dependent coverage. Yeah. I sat down across from her. I want to understand what I actually control. Riley nodded and pulled one of the manuals closer. Let me walk you through it. Under our union contract, primary employees have full discretion over dependent enrollment. That means you decide who gets added, who stays on, and who gets removed. There's no approval process, no waiting period, no penalty. So, if I wanted to remove someone, you'd fill out a form, submit it to HR, and the change would take effect on the 1st of the following month. Or sooner, if you request an immediate update due to qualifying life events. I leaned back in the chair. What counts as a qualifying life event? Marriage, divorce, birth, adoption, loss of other coverage, or a change in dependency status? Riley looked at me over her glasses. Why? Are you planning to make changes? Just gathering information. She studied me for a moment, then slid a packet across the desk. This covers everything. Forms, timelines, regulations. If you decide to move forward, just let me know. I took the packet and stood. Thanks, Riley. Damon? She waited until I turned back. Whatever you're dealing with, make sure you're making the decision for the right reasons. These things can get complicated. I know. I left the HR office and walked out to the parking lot. My phone buzzed. Another message from Lydia. Dad, I'm serious. I need an answer about the lease. The landlord wants a decision by Friday. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove home, parked in my driveway, and walked straight to the garage. The space was small, cluttered with tools and boxes I'd been meaning to organize for years. I cleared off the workbench and spread out the packet Riley had given me. Then I pulled out my phone and started going through old messages. There were hundreds of them. Years of conversations, most of them followed the same pattern. Lydia asking for something, me agreeing. Her thanking me briefly, then disappearing until the next request. I screenshotted the most telling ones and saved them to a folder on my laptop. Then I opened my email and searched for anything related to money. Rent payments I'd covered, car repairs, emergency loans. I found receipts, bank transfers, promises to pay me back that never materialized. I saved those too. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. I sat back and looked at everything I'd collected. It wasn't anger driving me. It was clarity. For years, I'd told myself I was being a good father, patient, understanding, supportive, but the truth was simpler and uglier. I'd been a tool, and I'd let it happen because I was afraid of what would happen if I said no. The next morning, I called Lydia. "Dad, thank God. I was starting to think you were avoiding me." "I'm not avoiding you. I've been thinking about the lease." "And?" "I need more details. How much is the rent? What's the lease term? What happens if you can't make payments?" She hesitated. "Why are you asking all this?" "Because if I'm going to co-sign, I need to know what I'm agreeing to." "It's just a formality, Dad. You won't actually have to pay anything?" "That's not how co-signing works. If you default, I'm responsible. So I need to see the lease agreement, the payment schedule, everything." "This is ridiculous. You're treating me like I'm some kind of stranger." "I'm treating you like someone asking me to take on a legal obligation. Send me the documents and I'll review them." She went quiet for a long moment. Then, in a colder voice, she said, "Fine, I'll send them." The call ended. 2 days later, I received an email from Lydia. The subject line read, "Studio lease. Please sign ASAP." I opened the attachment and started reading. The rent was $3,200 a month. The lease was for 3 years. There were no clauses about subletting or early termination. If they defaulted, I'd be on the hook for the full amount, plus penalties. I saved the document and didn't respond. That afternoon, Marcus called me. "Damon, hey, Lydia said you're being difficult about the lease." "I'm not being difficult. I'm being careful." "Look, man, we're family. You don't need to treat this like some kind of business deal." "It is a business deal. You're asking me to guarantee $3,200 a month for 3 years. That's over $100,000 in potential liability. We're not going to default. Then you won't mind if I take my time reviewing the terms?" Marcus's voice sharpened. "You know what your problem is, Damon? You think too much. You overthink everything. That's why Lydia doesn't respect you. You're too scared to just trust people." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, took a breath, then brought it back. "I'll let you know my decision when I'm ready," I said, and ended the call. That evening, I went back to the garage and pulled out the HR packet again. I filled out the first form, the one requesting a policy review consultation. It was a preliminary step, nothing binding, just a formal request for the company to outline my current coverage and any dependents attached to it. I signed it, scanned it, and emailed it to Riley. The next morning, I received a confirmation. "Your requested policy updates will take effect on the date you selected." I read the message 3 times. Then I went to work. The county administrative building was a squat, gray structure on the north side of town. I'd driven past it 1,000 times, but never had a reason to go inside. Today, I did. I parked in the visitor lot and walked through the front doors. The lobby smelled like old carpet and printer toner. A directory on the wall listed departments: records, licensing, legal services, benefits administration. I took the stairs to the 3rd floor. The benefits administration office was at the end of a long hallway. Inside, a woman sat behind a desk, typing on a computer. She looked up when I entered. "Can I help you?" "I need to file some paperwork," I said. "Dependent coverage updates." She handed me a clipboard with 3 forms attached. "Fill these out. Make sure you sign and date each one. Bring them back to me when you're done." I took the clipboard and sat in one of the plastic chairs along the wall. The forms were straightforward: name, employee ID number, dependent information, requested changes, effective date. I filled them out slowly, carefully, checking each line twice before moving to the next. When I finished, I brought them back to the desk. The woman reviewed them, stamped each one, and handed me a receipt. "Processing takes 3 to 5 business days. You'll receive a confirmation email once the changes are finalized." "Thank you." I left the building and drove home. That night, Lydia called again. "Dad, I'm running out of time. The landlord needs an answer by tomorrow. Are you going to co-sign or not?" "I'm not," I said. Silence. "What?" "I reviewed the lease. I'm not comfortable with the terms. I'm sorry, but I can't do it." "Are you serious? After everything I've asked you for, this is the one thing I actually need, and you're saying no? This isn't about need, it's about risk. I'm not willing to take on that kind of liability." "Liability? I'm your daughter. And you're asking me to guarantee $100,000 in debt for a business that doesn't exist yet. That's not reasonable." Her voice rose. "You're unbelievable. You know that? You act like you care, but when it actually matters, you're useless." I didn't respond. "Fine," she said. "Forget it. I'll figure it out myself, just like I always do." She hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the wall. The next day, I received an email from the county. Subject line, Dependent Coverage Update, Confirmation. I opened it and read through the details. Everything had been processed. The changes would take effect in 72 hours. I forwarded the email to my personal archive and deleted the original. 2 days later, Lydia sent me a text. Hey Dad, I know things have been weird between us. I'm hosting a charity event next week and I'd really like you to come. It would mean a lot to me. Please? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, I'll be there. She sent back a smiley face emoji. I didn't respond. That weekend, I went back to the garage and pulled out all the documents I'd collected. Text messages, bank records, the lease agreement, the forms I'd filed with the county, the confirmation email from HR. I organized everything into a folder and labeled it Coverage and Agreements, Lydia Rowan. Then I set it aside and waited. The charity event was scheduled for Friday evening at a banquet hall downtown. Lydia had sent me an invitation with all the details. The theme was wellness and community. There would be speeches, a silent auction, and a presentation about her studio plans. She'd also mentioned in a follow-up text that I should behave properly in public. She didn't explain what that meant. She didn't need to. On Thursday afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. Mr. Vessel, this is David Ortega from Summit Leasing. I'm calling about the commercial lease agreement your daughter submitted. I didn't co-sign that lease, I said. I'm aware. That's why I'm calling. The application listed you as the guarantor, but we haven't received your signature. We need that by end of business today, or we'll have to decline the application. I'm not signing it. A pause. Can I ask why? Because I reviewed the terms and decided it wasn't in my best interest. I see. Well, without a guarantor, we can't approve the lease. I'll inform Ms. Rowan. Thank you. The call ended. 10 minutes later, Lydia called me. What did you do? I told the leasing company I'm not co-signing. You called them? They called me. I answered honestly. Dad, you just destroyed everything. Do you understand that? The studio was our future, and you ruined it. I didn't ruin anything. You applied for a lease you couldn't afford without a guarantor. That's not my fault. You're supposed to be my father. I am your father, but I'm not your bank. She hung up. I sat in my kitchen, phone in hand, and felt nothing. The next day, I drove to the banquet hall. The banquet hall was larger than I expected. High ceilings, chandeliers, round tables draped in white cloth. At least 100 people filled the space, dressed in business casual, holding wine glasses and talking in clusters. I walked through the main entrance and spotted Lydia near the front. She wore a dark blue dress and was talking to a small group of women, smiling, gesturing with her hands. She looked confident, in control. She didn't see me. I moved to the side of the room and found a spot near the back corridor, away from the crowd. I wasn't here to mingle, I was here to watch. The event started at 7. A woman in a gray suit stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room and tapped the microphone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Angela Brennan, and I'm honored to be hosting this wonderful event supporting wellness initiatives in our community. Applause rippled through the room. Angela continued, introducing sponsors, thanking volunteers, talking about the importance of mental and physical health. I watched Lydia in the front row, sitting next to Marcus, both of them nodding along. The room felt warm. Too many bodies, too much perfume mixing in the air. I could smell at least 3 different scents from where I stood, floral and sweet and cloying. My chest tightened slightly, but I'd taken my inhaler before leaving the house. I was prepared. I watched Lydia laugh at something Marcus whispered to her. She looked happy, relaxed, like someone who had everything figured out. Then Angela said something that made me straighten. And now I'd like to recognize someone who has been instrumental in supporting tonight's event. Damon Vassell, could you please stand? Every head in the room turned toward me. I didn't move. Angela smiled, shading her eyes against the stage lights. Damon, are you here? Lydia stood and looked back, scanning the crowd. Her eyes found mine. For a moment, she looked confused. Then her expression shifted to something harder. I stepped forward, weaving through the tables toward the stage. People moved aside, creating a path. I could hear whispers starting, murmurs of curiosity. Angela extended a hand as I approached. Thank you for being here, Damon. Lydia has told us so much about your generosity and support. I shook her hand but didn't respond. Angela turned back to the crowd. We're especially grateful for Damon's sponsorship of tonight's wellness presentation. His contribution has made this evening possible. I stepped closer to the microphone. Actually, I said, there's been a misunderstanding. Angela blinked. I'm sorry. I didn't sponsor this event. The room went very quiet. Lydia stood, her face pale. Dad, what are you... I withdrew my sponsorship 3 days ago, I continued, voice steady. I submitted the paperwork on Tuesday. The organizers should have received notification. Angela looked between me and Lydia, clearly confused. I wasn't aware of any withdrawal. Check your email. It's in writing. I watched Angela pull out her phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. Her expression changed as she read. She looked up at me, then at Lydia, then back at me. I see it now, Angela said slowly. It came through Tuesday evening. I apologize, Mr. Vassal. There must have been a communication breakdown on our end. Lydia moved toward the stage, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Dad, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm not embarrassed, I said. I'm clarifying the record. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder I'd brought. Inside were copies of everything. The forms I'd filed. The confirmation emails, the text messages, the lease agreement Lydia had tried to manipulate me into signing. I also need to clarify something else, I said, addressing the room now. My daughter has been using my health insurance coverage for the past 3 years. She listed me as her primary guarantor for that coverage and for several financial agreements. As of this morning, I've removed her from all dependent access under my employee benefits. Lydia's face went from pale to red. You can't do that. I already did. I followed every regulation, submitted every required form, and confirmed the changes with HR and the county benefits office. It's done. Marcus stood now, his voice rising. This is insane. You're doing this because we didn't do what you wanted? I'm doing this because you've been using me as a resource without respect or acknowledgement. I'm doing this because my daughter sprayed perfume directly at me knowing it would trigger my asthma, then laughed about it. I'm doing this because she called me weak, told her friends I was just a backup plan, and demanded I co-sign a lease for a business she couldn't afford. The room was completely silent now. I could see people exchanging glances, some looking uncomfortable, others leaning forward with interest. Lydia's voice dropped to a hiss. You're making this up. I have text messages, recorded conversations, receipts for every loan you never paid back, documentation of every time you dismissed my health concerns or used me for financial support without any intention of reciprocating. I opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a note you left me at a cafe 2 weeks ago. You wrote, Dad, thanks for always being there when I need you. You're the best backup plan a girl could ask for. I held it up so the room could see. Lydia's face crumpled. That was a joke. It wasn't funny. I looked around the room, making eye contact with several people. I want everyone here to understand something. I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing this because for years I let myself be treated as less than I deserved. I told myself it was fine because she was my daughter. I told myself family meant accepting disrespect. But I was wrong. Angela stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Mr. Vassal, perhaps we could discuss this privately. No, I said. This needs to be said here. Lydia built her reputation on the idea that she had support, that she had backing, that her father would always be there to catch her when she fell, but that support was conditional on basic respect, and she violated that condition repeatedly. I turned to face Lydia directly. You told me I owed you because I wasn't there when you were growing up. But I was there. I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for your college. I covered your rent when you lost your job. I co-signed your car loan. I gave you everything I had, and you treated it like it was nothing. Tears were forming in her eyes now, but I couldn't stop. And when I asked for one thing, just basic consideration for my health, you laughed. You made jokes. You told your friends I was dramatic. You used my asthma as a punchline. The room felt heavy with tension. No one moved, no one spoke. So, yes, I said, I removed you from my health coverage. I withdrew my sponsorship of this event. I declined to co-sign your lease, because I finally realized that being a good father doesn't mean letting my daughter treat me like I'm disposable. I closed the folder and tucked it back into my jacket. I'm sorry if this disrupts your evening, I said to Angela, but these things needed to be said. I stepped down from the stage and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Lydia's voice, shaky and desperate. Dad, wait, please. I didn't turn around. I pushed through the doors into the back corridor. The hallway was empty, lit by overhead fluorescents that buzzed faintly. I could hear my own breathing, steady and calm. The door behind me opened. Lydia stood there, mascara running down her cheeks. How could you do that? She said. How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone? I didn't humiliate you. I told the truth. You made me look terrible. I described what happened. If that makes you look terrible, maybe you should think about why. She took a step closer. You're my father. You're supposed to protect me? I did protect you, for years. But you mistook protection for permission. You thought you could do anything, and I'd just absorb it. I won't anymore. So what, you're just going to abandon me? Leave me with nothing? You're 27 years old. You have a husband, you have a job. You have everything you need to take care of yourself. You just don't want to. I don't have health insurance now because of you. You can buy your own. It's called the marketplace. Millions of people do it. She stared at me, her face a mixture of shock and rage. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe it took me this long. I turned and walked toward the exit door at the end of the corridor. Dad, I kept walking. Dad, please, I'm sorry. I'll change. I'll do better. I reached the door and pushed it open. Cool night air hit my face. I stepped outside into the courtyard, breathing deeply, letting the clean air fill my lungs. Behind me, I heard Lydia's footsteps in the hallway, her voice calling my name again and again. But I didn't turn around. I walked across the courtyard to the parking lot, got in my truck, and drove away. The drive home took 15 minutes. I kept the windows cracked, cold air rushing through the cab, clearing out the lingering smell of perfume from the banquet hall. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing was calm. I'd expected to feel something, guilt, maybe, regret, the weight of what I'd just done settling onto my shoulders like a physical thing, but I didn't. I felt clear. When I pulled into my driveway, the house was dark. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, dropping my keys on the counter like I did every night. The familiar sound echoed through the empty rooms. I walked to the kitchen and filled a glass with water. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw 3 missed calls from Lydia, 2 from Marcus, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I set the phone face down on the counter and drank the water slowly. The house was quiet. No hum of conversation, no television in the background, just the soft tick of the clock on the wall and the distant sound of traffic outside. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. My email inbox showed 27 new messages. I scanned the subject lines. Tonight's event, follow up from Angela. Urgent, please call from Lydia. Policy confirmation receipt from Riley at HR. I opened Riley's email first. Damon, this confirms that all requested changes to your dependent coverage have been processed and are now active. Lydia Rowan has been removed from your health insurance plan effective immediately. If you have any questions, please contact me directly. I saved the email and closed it. The next message was from Harold. Heard what happened at the event. Don't know all the details, but I'm guessing it went the way you planned. Call me if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll see you Monday. I smiled slightly and closed that one too. The rest of the emails were from people I didn't know. Friends of Lydia's, probably. People who'd been at the event. I deleted them without reading. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Lydia. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. Dad, please. I know you're angry. I know I messed up. But you can't just cut me off like this. I'm your daughter. We can fix this. Please call me. I read it twice, then set the phone back down. Another text arrived. I'm sorry about the perfume. I didn't think it would hurt you that much. I was being stupid. Please, just talk to me. Then another. Marcus and I are going to lose everything because of this. The studio, our apartment, everything. You're destroying our lives. I picked up the phone and typed a response. You destroyed your own lives by building them on resources you didn't earn and didn't appreciate. I'm not responsible for fixing that. I sent it and turned the phone off completely. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, but not in a bad way. It felt like the silence after a storm passes, the kind where the air is still and clean and everything feels new. I stood and walked to the garage. The workbench was still cluttered with tools and papers from the past few weeks. I started organizing it, putting everything back in its place, wrenches in the drawer, screws sorted by size, documents filed away. It took an hour, but when I finished, the space looked clean, functional, ready for whatever came next. I went back inside and sat on the couch in the living room. The television was off. I didn't turn it on. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, thinking about the look on Lydia's face when I'd stepped off that stage. She'd looked shocked, betrayed even, like she genuinely couldn't understand how I'd reached that point. And maybe that was the saddest part. She'd been so convinced of her version of reality, the version where I was weak and she was justified, that she couldn't see what she'd been doing. I thought about the perfume incident in the parking lot, the way she'd smiled before spraying it, the way she'd told me to leave if I didn't like it. I thought about the cafe, overhearing her call me useful but not respectable. I thought about the lease agreement, the way she'd tried to guilt me into signing by claiming I owed her, and I thought about all the years before that. The small dismissals, the forgotten birthdays, the loans that were never repaid, the way she'd slowly trained me to accept less and less until I was accepting nothing at all. My phone vibrated on the counter. I'd turned it off, but the battery must have drained enough to reset it. I walked over and checked the screen. 17 new messages, all from Lydia. I scrolled through them without opening them. Please. Dad, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Just talk to me. I need you. You're draining the life out of me. How can you be this cruel? I set the phone down and walked away. The next morning, I woke up early. 6 o'clock, like always. I made coffee, took my inhaler, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I checked my bank account. Everything looked normal. No unexpected withdrawals, no last-minute attempts to access funds she thought she still had access to. I checked my email. More messages from Lydia, more messages from people at the event. One from Irene, my ex-wife. I opened that one. Damon, Lydia called me last night. She was hysterical. She said you humiliated her at some charity event and cut off her health insurance. I don't know what's going on between you two, but she sounded genuinely upset. Can you call me when you get a chance? I typed a response. Irene, I'm happy to talk, but I want you to know that everything I said at the event was true. Lydia has been treating me poorly for years, and I finally reached a point where I couldn't accept it anymore. I removed her from my health coverage because she's an adult who needs to take responsibility for herself. I'm not abandoning her, I'm setting boundaries. If she told you I was cruel, ask her about the Perfume incident. Ask her about the things she said about me to her friends, then decide for yourself. I sent it and closed the laptop. The rest of the day passed quietly. I cleaned the house. I went for a walk around the neighborhood. I cooked myself dinner, something simple, just pasta and vegetables, and ate it slowly, savoring the silence. By evening, my phone had stopped buzzing. The messages had stopped coming. Either Lydia had given up, or she was regrouping. I suspected the latter. On Monday, I went back to work. The plant felt normal. People nodded as I passed. No one mentioned the event. Either they didn't know, or they were being polite. Harold stopped by the lab around noon. How are you holding up? He asked. Fine. Lydia still calling? Not since yesterday. He nodded slowly. That's usually when the next phase starts. What do you mean? The apology phase. She'll come at you with a different strategy, more emotional, more desperate. You need to be ready for that. I am. He studied me for a moment. Yeah, I think you are. That afternoon, I received an email from Lydia. The subject line read, I'm sorry. I opened it. Dad, I know you don't want to hear from me right now, but I need you to know that I understand why you're upset. I was wrong. I took you for granted. I treated you poorly. I made jokes about your health that weren't funny. I see that now, and I'm truly, genuinely sorry. I know saying sorry doesn't fix everything, but I'm asking for a chance to prove I can do better. I'm asking for a chance to rebuild what we had. Please, give me one more chance. I read it 3 times. Then I closed it and went back to work. The thing was, I believed her. I believed she was sorry. I believed she could see, at least partially, what she'd done wrong. But I also knew that sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't undo years of disrespect. Sorry didn't erase the Perfume incident or the cafe conversation or the manipulative lease agreement. Sorry was just a word, and words were cheap. That evening, I sat down and wrote a response. Lydia, I appreciate your apology, but apologies require action, not just words. If you want to rebuild our relationship, you need to demonstrate real change over time. That means taking responsibility for your own life. That means getting your own health insurance, managing your own finances, and treating me with genuine respect, not just when you need something. Until I see consistent evidence of that change, I'm maintaining the boundaries I've set. I hope you understand. I sent it and closed my laptop. 2 days later, Marcus showed up at my house. I was in the garage when I heard the knock. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the front door. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. Damon, can we talk? About what? About what you did, about Lydia, about all of this. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Go ahead. Look, man, I get it. You're upset. Lydia made some mistakes. But don't you think you're taking this too far? She's your daughter. You're destroying her over some petty stuff. It's not petty. She sprayed perfume near you. That's not the end of the world. She knowingly triggered my asthma, laughed about it, and then told her friends I was being dramatic. That's not a mistake. That's cruelty. Marcus shifted his weight. Okay, fine. She screwed up. But cutting off her health insurance? That's extreme. She's an adult. She can get her own. We can't afford it right now. Then get better jobs or cut expenses. That's not my problem. His expression hardened. You know what your problem is? You're bitter. You're angry because your life didn't turn out the way you wanted, so you're taking it out on her. I looked at him for a long moment. Marcus, I'm going to say this once. What I did wasn't about revenge. It was about self-respect. I set boundaries that I should have set years ago. If Lydia can't accept that, that's her choice. But I'm done being treated like I'm disposable. Now get off my property. He stared at me, jaw tight, then turned and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, then went back inside. The house felt quieter than ever, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. 3 weeks passed without a word from Lydia. No calls, no texts, no emails. It was the longest stretch of silence we'd had in years. I went to work, came home, lived my life. Harold checked in occasionally, asking how I was holding up. I told him I was fine, and I meant it. Irene called once. We talked for an hour. She told me Lydia had reached out to her, asking for money to cover health insurance premiums. Irene had said no. I told her she needed to figure it out herself. Irene said, I think you did the right thing, Damon. It took guts. Thanks. How are you feeling about it? Honestly, relieved. She was quiet for a moment. Good. You deserved better than how she treated you. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen and thought about that. Deserved better. It was such a simple phrase, but it carried weight. For years, I'd convinced myself that wanting better was selfish, that accepting less was noble, that enduring disrespect was what good fathers did. But I'd been wrong. Good fathers set examples. They taught boundaries. They showed their children what respect looked like. And I'd failed at that. Not because I was cruel, but because I was too kind. On a Thursday afternoon, Riley called me into her office. Damon, I wanted to give you a heads up. Lydia submitted a request to be reinstated on your health coverage. I sat down across from her. She can't do that without my approval, right? Correct. She filled out the dependent application form, but it requires your signature as the primary account holder. I wanted to let you know before I formally rejected it. Thank you. Riley leaned back in her chair. Can I ask you something? Off the record? Sure. Do you think you'll ever let her back on? I thought about it. Maybe, if she shows real change, but not anytime soon. Riley nodded. Fair enough. That weekend, I drove out to the plant's testing facility. It was closed on Saturdays, but I had clearance to access the lab for personal projects. I'd been working on a small metallurgy study in my spare time, analyzing stress patterns in different alloys. It was quiet work, methodical, the kind of thing that cleared my head. I set up the testing equipment and loaded a sample into the press. The machine hummed to life, applying pressure slowly, incrementally. I watched the needle climb, recorded the measurements, noted the exact point where the metal began to yield. Some materials were brittle. They snapped under pressure, breaking cleanly. Others were ductile. They bent, deformed, absorbed the stress until they couldn't anymore. People were like that too. I'd spent years bending, absorbing, deforming under the weight of Lydia's expectations. And I'd told myself that made me strong. But strength wasn't about how much you could endure. It was about knowing when to stop bending. On Monday morning, I received an email from Angela, the event organizer. Mr. Vasil, I wanted to reach out and apologize for the confusion at last month's event. I should have checked my messages more carefully before making that announcement. I also wanted to let you know that several attendees reached out afterward to express support for what you said. I think many people understood where you were coming from. I hope you're doing well. I replied with a brief thank you and moved on. That afternoon, Harold stopped by with news. You hear about Lydia's studio? No. It's not happening. The lease fell through. Apparently, they couldn't find another guarantor. I nodded slowly. That makes sense. Marcus is blaming you, telling people you sabotaged them. Let him? Harold smiled slightly. You really don't care, do you? I care, but I'm not responsible for fixing problems I didn't create. He clapped me on the shoulder. Good man. That evening, I sat in my living room and opened my laptop. I navigated to my bank account and reviewed my finances. For the first time in years, there were no unexpected withdrawals, no emergency transfers, no loans I'd never see repaid. My account was stable, growing even. I'd forgotten what that felt like. I closed the laptop and leaned back on the couch, hands folded behind my head. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Vassell, this is David Ortega from Summit Leasing. I wanted to follow up on our previous conversation. Your daughter and her husband have abandoned their lease application. I wanted to confirm you were aware and had no further involvement. I replied, confirmed, thank you for letting me know. Another text came through a moment later, this time from Lydia. I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. We lost everything. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed a response. I didn't want this. Oh, but I also didn't cause it. You built something on a foundation that wasn't yours. It was bound to collapse eventually. I'm sorry you're hurting, but this is a consequence of your choices, not mine. I sent it and set the phone down. A minute later, another message appeared. You're heartless. I didn't respond. The next day, Irene called again. Lydia reached out to me. She's really struggling, Damon. I know. She's talking about moving back in with me for a while. She and Marcus can't afford their apartment anymore. That's between you and her. I'm not going to let her move in. I think it would be enabling her, but I wanted you to know. I appreciate that. Damon? Yeah? You did the right thing. I know. We hung up. That evening, I went for a walk around the neighborhood. The air was cool, crisp, the kind of autumn night where everything felt clear. I passed houses with lights on, families moving around inside, lives happening in quiet, ordinary ways. I thought about Lydia, about the girl she used to be and the woman she'd become, about the choices she'd made and the consequences she was facing now. Part of me felt sad for her, but that sadness didn't change anything. She'd spent years treating me like I was optional, like my health didn't matter, like my feelings were irrelevant. And I'd let her, but not anymore. When I got home, I made myself dinner and ate it slowly. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out the folder I'd kept in the garage, the one with all the documents, all the evidence, all the receipts. I flipped through it one last time, reading the text messages, the emails, the notes. Then I closed it, walked to the garage, and filed it away on a high shelf. I didn't need it anymore. The story was over. 4 weeks after the banquet hall incident, Lydia showed up at my house. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the knock. I looked through the window and saw her standing on the porch, arms crossed, face pale. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. What do you want? I need to talk to you. So talk. She glanced past me into the house, then back at my face. Can I come in? No. Her jaw tightened. Dad, please. I drove all the way here. And I'm listening. Right here. She took a breath, clearly trying to control her emotions. Marcus and I are separating. I didn't respond. We've been fighting nonstop since the event. He blames me for losing the studio. I blame him for pushing me to ask you for things. It's a mess. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Yes. I don't want you to suffer, but I'm not responsible for your relationship. Her eyes filled with tears. Everything fell apart because of what you did. Everything fell apart because it was built on a foundation that couldn't support it. I just removed one piece. If that was enough to collapse everything, then it was going to collapse anyway. She wiped her eyes. I need help, Dad. I don't have anywhere to go. I can't afford my apartment without Marcus. I don't have health insurance. I don't have savings. I have nothing. You have a job. Part-time retail doesn't pay enough to live on. Then get a better job, or a second job. Millions of people do it. I can't believe you're being this cold. I looked at her for a long moment. Lydia, I'm not being cold. I'm being clear. You spent years treating me like I was disposable. You mocked my health problems. You used me for money and support, and never gave anything back. You told your friends I was weak. You manipulated me into situations I didn't want to be in. And when I finally set boundaries, you acted like I was the one being unreasonable. I was wrong. I admitted that. You admitted it after you lost access to the things you wanted. That's not the same as genuine change. So what? You're just going to let me struggle? Let me lose everything? You're not losing everything. You're losing things you couldn't afford in the first place. There's a difference. She stared at me, her face a mixture of anger and desperation. I'm your daughter. I know, and I love you. But love doesn't mean accepting disrespect. It doesn't mean sacrificing my own dignity to make your life easier. It means setting boundaries and hoping you'll eventually understand why they're necessary. You're punishing me. I'm protecting myself. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she just shook her head and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away, then closed the door and went back to my coffee. It was cold now. I poured it out and made a fresh cup. The rest of the day passed quietly. I worked in the garage, organizing tools, cleaning up projects I'd been putting off. It felt good to have control over something, to make decisions that were entirely my own. That evening, Harold called. Heard Lydia stop by. News travels fast. Small town, how'd it go? About how you'd expect. She wanted help. I said no. How do you feel about that? Fine. Sad, maybe. But fine. Good. You're doing the right thing. I know. We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. I sat on the couch and turned on the television, something I hadn't done in weeks. The news was on. Stories about politics, weather, local events, normal things, ordinary things. I watched for a while, then turned it off and sat in the silence. My phone buzzed. A text from Lydia. I'm not giving up on us. I'm going to prove to you that I can change. I'm going to show you that I'm better than this. I read it twice, then set the phone down without responding. Words were easy. Change was hard. If she wanted to prove something, she'd have to do it through actions, not promises. And I'd wait as long as it took to see if those actions ever came. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run. It was something I'd started doing a few weeks ago, part of an effort to take better care of myself. My asthma made it harder, but I'd learned to pace myself, to listen to my body, to stop when I needed to. The neighborhood was quiet at 6 in the morning. Just a few other runners, a couple of dog walkers, the occasional car passing by. I ran for 30 minutes, then walked back home. By the time I got to my driveway, my lungs were tight, but not dangerously so. I used my inhaler, caught my breath, and went inside. The house felt different now. Lighter. Like a weight had been lifted that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I showered, made breakfast, and sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. I checked my email. Nothing urgent. A few work-related messages. A reminder about an upcoming union meeting, and one email from Lydia. The subject line read, "Moving forward." I hesitated, then opened it. Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but I wanted you to know that I got a second job. It's just waiting tables at a restaurant downtown, but it's something. I also signed up for health insurance through the marketplace. It's expensive, but I'm managing. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm just telling you that I'm trying. I'm trying to be the person you wanted me to be. I hope someday we can talk again. Love, Lydia. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the laptop and went to work. 6 weeks after the banquet hall, I received a call from Angela Brennan. Mr. Vassell, I hope I'm not bothering you. I wanted to reach out because we're planning another event next month, and I thought you might be interested in attending. No pressure, of course, but several people from the last event specifically asked if you'd be there. Why would they want me there? Because what you said resonated with them. A lot of people have dealt with family members who take advantage. They appreciated your honesty. I thought about it. I'll consider it. That's all I ask. Thank you, Damon. That evening, I sat in the garage and looked at the workbench. Everything was organized now, clean, functional, ready. I thought about Lydia's email, the second job, the health insurance, the small steps toward independence. Part of me wanted to respond, to acknowledge her effort, to tell her I was proud, but another part of me knew it was too soon. One email didn't undo years of behavior. 1 month of effort didn't prove lasting change. She needed to do this for herself, not for me, and I needed to stay firm. My phone buzzed. A text from Harold. Union meeting tomorrow at 4. You coming? I replied, I'll be there. The next day, I went to work as usual. The plant felt comfortable now, familiar in a way it hadn't been in years. I moved through my tasks with quiet efficiency, running tests, recording data, solving problems. At 4 o'clock, I walked to the union office. Harold was already there, along with a dozen other workers. We discussed contract negotiations, safety protocols, benefits updates, routine stuff, normal stuff. Afterward, Harold pulled me aside. You look different. How so? Lighter, like you've been carrying a weight and finally set it down. Maybe I have, he nodded. Good. You earned it. I drove home as the sun set, the sky turning orange and pink. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the truck for a moment, engine off, just looking at the house. It was small, ordinary, nothing special. But it was mine. I got out and walked to the front door. As I reached for the handle, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Lydia stood in the driveway, hands in her jacket pockets, looking uncertain. I know you said not to come by, she said, but I needed to see you. I didn't say anything. I got my first paycheck from the restaurant, and I paid my first health insurance premium, and I realized something. She paused. I realized that you were right about everything. I was using you. I was treating you like you didn't matter, and I'm sorry. I watched her carefully. You've said you're sorry before. I know, but this time I mean it, because this time I understand why I was wrong. Do you? You weren't weak, you were patient, and I mistook that patience for weakness. I thought I could keep pushing because you'd never push back. But you did, and you were right too. I took a breath. Lydia, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to let me back into your life. I'm just asking you to know that I finally understand. And I'm going to keep trying, even if you never talk to me again. She turned and started walking back to her car. Lydia. She stopped. I'm glad you're trying, I said. But trying isn't the same as changing. If you really want to rebuild what we had, you'll need to show me, over time, that this isn't just temporary, that it's real. She nodded slowly. I will, I promise. Don't promise. Just do it. She got in her car and drove away. I stood there for a moment, watching the taillights disappear down the street. Then I went inside, closed the door, and locked it behind me.